Good morning. I hope you can hear me. Nikos Avlonas, and I'm going to leading the session today on how ESRS and EU legislation is going to affect US business in 2025 and beyond that. So I hope you can see me and you can hear me well. Let's get started. I know we have a couple of sustainability professionals in our group today, so very nice to meet you, Brian. I know you turned on your camera. Thank you for that. But, if you can all turn on your cameras, Peter, Nick, Stephen, and Dara, it would be great. And, all of you. So in order to have, a very brief introduction, Peter, Nick, and Robert. So please do turn on your camera, and I'm going to start my presentation in the next minute or so. So I hope you can see my presentation as well. Wonderful. So, okay, shall we get started? Okay, the CSRD is the new upcoming legislation in Europe, and it is a very, very demanding legislation. Already in Europe has been getting started, but also is going to affect, according to our predictions, over 3,000 business. And it's going to change the way of their sustainability reporting. It's going to change the way they comply with particular sustainability systems and ratings. And of course, I would be happy to share more information about that. So before that, allow me to share a few things about CSE. So CSE is a global consulting and educational organization where we specialized in ESG, and we work with Fortune 500 and other organizations around the globe, improving their ESG ratings and create purpose-driven strategies and ESG reports. We are a global partner with GRI, with Green America Certified Business, and we have been awarded by Silicon Valley in 2018 and by the Environment+Energy Leader in 2021. As an organization, we have a global footprint, but we have two headquarters, one in Greece, in Athens, where it is the European headquarters, and the North American is in Chicago, where I'm based off. So we are very much aware of legislations of both sides of the Atlantic because we have a very big client portfolio, both in US, Canada, and all over Europe. Here is our clients' carbon footprint in 2023. Their consolidated revenues are about $90 billion. They employ more than 300 employees. And you can see some brands among several other clients that we have worked with for several years in 2023 and before that. Okay, let's start with our presentation and about winning the ESG race, because as you're going to find out, ESG is a race, it's not a checklist, and things are moving really fast there. There are two levels. The first level is the compliance with global legislation, and in this case, the EU legislation is the highest one in the globe. And level B is improve your ESG ratings and stay ahead. Of course, today I'm going to cover mostly the compliance with global legislation and mostly European legislation because it's the highest one. And we're going to talk more about how this legislation is going to affect thousands of US-based business. But before that, I would like to hear from you via chat if there are any particular interest why you join this session. Are your company is also operating in Europe? Do you consider that your company is going to be affected by the new CSRD legislations? Are there any other issues? Do send with me a chat in order to help to talk more about specific issues or specific worries or challenges you may have on this particular topic. All right, so let's talk on level A, which is the compliance with global legislation. And of course, I'm going to give you more information about the EU legislation and what's happening right now. Everything gets started by EU Green Deal, which started a few years ago. and it is about the commitment of EU to becoming carbon neutral by 2050. Of course, that was the beginning of the whole thing, because this means that there are almost 200 legislations or directives, as we call it, that the European companies have to comply with. So the Green Deal is the beginning of the production of several directives or legislations that heavily affect today more than 3,000 business, and by 27, almost 50,000 business, according to our prediction. But we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. Just to give you a very brief outreach, every country needs to have a circular economy plan. This is mandatory. As you know, single-use plastic is forbidden in Europe since 2021. There is mandatory reporting legislation since 2017 for all large public listed companies in Europe. And there are several other legislations in EU, including EU taxonomy, SFDR, and recently the CSRD legislation. So I'm going to give you a very brief overview in the next second or so. I can happy to see your faces, Brian and Stephen, and of course we can have exchange views later on in the Q&A session. So let's get started with CSRD. CSRD is not a new legislation, as most of you probably believe. It gets started as NFRD back in 2017. In 2017, in Europe, there was the first legislation that it was mandatory for all large publicly listed firms to issue a sustainability report. And since then, there are thousands of companies that do that on an annual basis. The only challenge that the European business had is that there was not a standardized framework for doing a report. So most of the business was using GRI framework, SASB, and many other rating systems. The CSRD is the successor of NFRD legislation, and the new big thing in Europe is the new reporting system that they have been created for reporting, and they call it ESRS, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. And I think this is a very big new deal that we're going to talk in a few minutes or so. But let's go back to the CSRD. The CSRD is going to affect in 2024, which is now, publicly listed companies with over 500 employees. These companies, it's mandatory to do a sustainability report according to the new European Sustainability Reporting System standards. Also, it's mandatory for large companies that they have more than 250 employees or 40 billion euros in turnover or 20 million euros in total assets. And this is started in 1st January of 2025. And for small, medium enterprises, this is going to start also from the 1st January 2027. So as you're going to see, is affecting the vast majority of European business. And approximately is the estimation that is going to affect 50,000 European business since the beginning of 2025. So it's a massive directive, is going to affect everything. A very important aspect of this legislation is that the limited external assurance is becoming mandatory from January 1st, 2025. And this is something that very few people know already. So happy to share that with you. And mandatory external assurance is in the beginning, and all the companies should comply with that, for the companies which are under the CSRD legislation. So the big question is that how will affect the US business? That's the big question. So according to official data, more than 3,000 US business will have to comply. And this business are multinational organizations that have substantial operations in EU, publicly listed companies, US companies listed on on EU regulated markets, or companies with significant EU turnover, which means business generating significant revenue from EU markets. So these are the three types of companies that is going to be affected. Our research findings have identified that it's going to be more than 4,500 business at least. So 4,500 business at minimum, but not the official number, which is 3,000 business. because there are many companies that were not publicly listed or multinational, but they still have significant EU turnover in one or another country. So you can see immediately that the influence of the CSRD legislation is going to be very high in the United States. Let's take a more closer look to that. So the ESRS standards, which are the new European Sustainability Reporting Standards, which was something that everybody was expecting that, to be honest, is really challenged and demanding. They're more demanding than GRI standards, if you are familiar with them, or SASB, or TCFD, or any other standards or ratings you have experienced in the past as sustainability professionals. They have the general requirements, which are 10 sections with sub-indicators, which are mandatory, by the way, for any kind of organization. They have the general disclosures, which include 16 indicators on environmental, social, and governance aspects, including strategy, impact, risks, opportunity management, metrics, and targets. But the most important is they also include almost 100 indicators on environment, social, and governance topics. So you can see below that they have 46 indicators of environment, 45 indicators for the social aspects, and 8 indicators for the corporate governance issues. I hope you understand that this means that forget SASB, forget GRI, if you are already issuing a report. We're talking about really challenging that your organization needs to comply with and far more demanding than this kind of standards. Another aspect of the ESRS, the European Reporting Sustainability Standards, is that there's a requirement for double materiality. And this is a requirement for an annual basis, year by year, which means that the organizations have to do the traditional impact materiality, which most organizations do. I mean, for example, if you're using GRI standards, I'm sure you are all familiar with impact materiality. But additionally to that, you have to do a financial materiality, which means you have to identify issues that really affect your cash flow, you really affect your financial issues. And the combination of impact materiality and financial materiality is considered as a double materiality assessment. Already, CSE has done over 5 double materiality assessments in Europe because there is a high request for that the last couple of months. And as you can see, it's not an easy exercise to do so because it creates 2 perspectives, the impact perspective, which is the stakeholder perspective, but also the financial materiality perspective, which is the outside perspective to the factors that really influence the organization internally on financial issues. Another issue is that there are mandatory disclosures on ESRS, and this is the ESRS 2, as they call it, which are the general requirements, and the ESRS E1, which is the climate change. So no matter what is going to be the outcome of materiality assessment or double materiality assessment, there's still a lot of information which you need to report or capture under the ESRS. And this is a lot of stuff that you have to do. Another important legislation, which is voted by European Parliament a month ago, is the Due Diligence Directive. This is going to end there in 2025 and is expected to impact millions of suppliers of European business all over the globe. So under this legislation, the companies in Europe that have more than 500 employees with a net turnover of more than 150 million euros in the last financial year, or 250 plus employees in average with a net turnover of more than 40 million euros, they need to do a due diligence to their supply chains. And they need to apply specific criteria and investigate how particular sustainability criteria on ESG are applied not only on tier 1 supplier, but in all over the supply chain. And I hope you can understand that this is going to influence millions of suppliers in Asia, in the US, in Africa, everybody who is part of the supply chain, and most of you are, by the way, you're going to get questionnaires and you're going to be required to meet particular requirements, which are based on European sustainability reporting standards. This legislation has been already started in France and Germany last year, and is going to be expected to get started in all over Europe by 2025 or the beginning of 2026. So this is an upcoming legislation, and this is going to be very tough. In Germany already, there are penalties in the board of directors, and there is a jail sentence if the companies that do not comply at the board of directors level with the particular due diligence directive. So this is very strict, by the way, directive. It affects directly the board of directors, which make them responsible for the compliance on the due diligence level on their supply chain. Okay, and with that, here we want to share with you, it seems a lot, but we want to simplify things, and we're going to use our experience. We started using ESRS frameworks and double materiality assessment since August 2023, so we already have a lot of experience on that. We believe that these 3 steps is going to save you a lot of time, resources, and money for doing the right thing. So these are 3 practical steps, but it really helps you to comply in the most simple way without spending so much resources in doing this very complicated exercise. So the first step is to do a double materiality. And you have to do that first because you need to identify what are going to be the material issues that you have to comply based on the ESRS standards criteria. So the second step is to issue a gap analysis based on the ESRS framework, the European Sustainability Standards Framework, and identify what are the material issues and what kind of policies and metrics you actually have. If you already have a report, for example, meeting GRI standards, probably you're gonna meet 30% or 25% of ESRS legislation. It depends on your level of maturity. But no matter what, you're going to be able to find what are your gaps, what are the issues you should comply, and what kind of policies you should create in order to get prepared for full compliance. And the part 3, it's relate GRI standard requirements if you're already issuing a report with ESRS requirements and issue a report. If you already issue a GRI report, there is more likely that at least 25 to 30 or even 35% meet part of the criteria of ESRS, and then you have to do some extra work on that. So these are the 3 practical steps that we have already applied to more than 6 organizations already in Europe, but already there's a lot of demand here in the US for companies that are operating in Europe and going to need help, they need guidance, they need support. And most of it, we need to understand better what are the specific requirements of all these legislations and how it's going to affect their business. So this is my last slide for me. I would be happy to answer any questions you have in chat or live. I mean, we are a small group, so why not live? So, happy to answer or provide any kind of clarifications. So are there any questions or clarifications? Brian, Steven, Nick, Natasha, and anybody else?
Is there a clear definition of
Brian, go ahead. Would you like to introduce yourself to the rest of the group, if you don't mind?
Sure. Brian Jacob, and I'm supporting a company called Watershed Geo that does landfill closures. But you had said that the reporting obligation applies to small and medium enterprises with significant EU turnover, but I didn't see a financial threshold that defined significant.
Yes, the significant is in another slide. Let me go here.
I saw the 40 million euros with regard to ESRS.
Here we are. So we need to meet 2 of the 3 criteria: more than 200 employees, or 40 million in turnover, or 20 million in total assets. So we need to meet 2 of these criteria in the country of operations per country. So they're going to be US business that they may have this kind of operations in several countries, right? So we need to issue separate reports per country of operations. And we haven't seen any evidence yet for consolidated reports. This is an issue that EU needs to, come back with clarifications on that. And we hope that it's going to do that in the next 2 or 3 months or so.
Okay, thank you.
I hope I answered your question. Okay, any other questions? Clarifications, please go ahead.
Sorry, Nikos. Natasha,
Natasha, go ahead.
with Ecotech. I had a hard time joining the session, so I just came to the last slide. Will you be providing copy of the slides?
Yes, I would be happy to do so. I have your emails because, the energy leader has shared that with me, so happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Would you like me to
Great.
put the email in a chat? Would that be easier?
Please do so as well. Yes, I'm not sure if I have all the emails. They send me less than you are right now, so happy to do that. Would you like, Natasha, to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Natasha Mesco with Ecotech, private compliance consulting company, working with the emission inventory arena since 1990 and expanding on S&G right now. So looking forward, I'm really excited about the global movement and looking forward to learning more about it.
That's great. Okay. Are there any other questions or clarifications before we move on to the conclusions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Sadie Rice, I'm an ESG controller at Polaris. You had noted in one of your last slides, which of the ESRS disclosure requirements or topics were mandatory irrespective of materiality. And again, pretty new to the space, but my understanding was that with the finalized ESRS standards that came out, the only standard that is required by everybody is the ESRS 2, or that cross-cutting standard for general disclosure requirements, and ESRS E1 and ESRS S1 were now subject to the materiality assessment. Is that accurate?
Yeah, what is accurate from what you said is that the ESRS 2 are the general requirements and these are mandatory, so you're very right.
Yeah.
But the ESRS E1 on climate change is not mandatory, so it's not a subject to materiality assessment. It's mandatory to report no matter what is going to be the outcome of materiality, of the double materiality assessment action.
Okay, so that one is still mandatory, and then the first
Mandatory.
9 subtopics of ESRS S1 are still mandatory as well.
Yeah, so even if your double materiality assessment is not likely, of course, but it's going to take out, climate change indicators, you have to report on them in any case.
Okay, that is helpful.
Wonderful. Any other questions from anybody? I'm here to help and provide more information.
Maybe a quick question for you too on the ESRS E1. If that's mandatory for all companies, are all companies
No,
then...
it's not. No, it's not. It's just the general, requirements. It's providing more information on that, so it's not mandatory. The S1.
Oh, E1. Sorry, ESRS E1, the climate
E1.
change topic.
Yes, it's mandatory.
So that's mandatory. So then is every company that needs to comply with CSRD required to complete a climate risk scenario analysis?
The climate risk analysis, no. The climate risk analysis is not mandatory, it's optional. It's subject to double materiality assessment. I'm sorry about that. I just realized your question. Only climate change is mandatory in terms of reporting. Okay, guys, if there are any other questions, I would be happy to share with you more overall and give a summary of the ESRS. So ESRS is starting on January 1st, 2025 on large business, and then is moving on every year to other types of business, as you're going to see. So it moves gradually to more and more business, and it's going to affect 50,000 European business by 2027. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that if you are already doing a reporting with GRI standards, I think this is a great way to get started, because this is going to give you the good basis for moving on to ESRS. As a GRI partner, we have a module that connects GRI with ESRS. So this is going to save you a lot of time and resources, moving from GRI to ESRS requirements if you already comply with GRI standards. If not, you have to do the homework from the beginning. But even if you are complying with GRI standards, you still have to do this three-step approach. Starting with a double materiality assessment, it's really essential because it's going to classify what are the material issues you should report beyond the minimum requirements. Have a gap analysis and identify what kind of topics and policies you should create. And you're going to need time, approximately more than a year, to create these kinds of policies and metrics. And of course, the first step is the reporting side. So that's all the information on my side. I hope you really find my presentation useful. If you have an impact of this particular legislation, but no matter what I strongly believe is that this legislation is going to really be a game changer, because it's going to affect millions of business all over the globe. Even small, medium enterprises with 50 employees, if they're part of bigger supply chain, you have to expect that these companies are going to have a significant impact in their operations, in their business model, and in the way they see sustainability today. Because all this business, as you know, medium or small business, they see sustainability as a luxury, as a nice thing to do. But very soon they're going to understand that they need to comply with that if they want to keep their clients. So these are the two levels. This is what's happening. A last quote, using my 19 years experience in the field, is that the ESRS is going to becoming the dominant standard in the globe today. It's not going to be IFRS 1 or 2, as many believe. It's not going to be GRI, because ESRS is the standard with the highest requirements so far. Any other standard today, including GRI, SASB, TCFD, IFRS, and any other standard, are a small part of what ESRS is required. And therefore, it's more likely that ESRS in 1 year from now is going to become the most dominant standard in the globe today, and the most important one, because everybody else is going to be a sub-component of that. That's my last comment for all of you. Natasha, I'm going to send you, the presentation as I promised, and I'm going to send you an email with my, information if you need any more.
I would appreciate
information.
that.
Yeah, happy to get connected and provide you more information.
Could you just repeat slowly which standard you think that it will be leading one?
The ESRS, the European Sustainability
ESRS.
Reporting Standards, right? Because it's the
Got it.
highest one in the globe today, and everything else, more or less, it's sub-component of the criteria of ESRS.
Yes.
And that's the reason it's going to become the dominant standard from 2025 and afterwards. There's a lot of discussion, as you know, about ISSB standards.
Yes.
I don't think it's likely to play a dominant role very near in the next couple of months. The ESRS is going to play a dominant role likely, because consider that ISSB is not mandatory, is voluntary, while ESRS is mandatory. So
Yes.
you can understand the difference between mandatory compliance and a nice thing to do like ISSB or GRI or SASB or any other kind of this type of standards.
It will also
Of
be
course,
interesting. California is working on a detailed rule for climate disclosure, climate risk. As a new
absolutely. I had the
application.
honor, and I had the honor to work with SEC back in 2021 for the creation of the SEC climate rule, by the way.
Yeah, SEC starting to ask, but California has 2 bills that will require more detailed reporting. So
Yes,
this will be
but also
interesting to see.
California applied the SEC climate rule,
Oh, yes,
right?
yes,
At the same
absolutely.
time, that's what I wanted to say.
Just goes a little more stringent So it will be interesting
Yeah.
to see the details. How do they relate to the European standard?
Yes, California and Canada are more closer to a European approach than the rest of the states, if we have to be honest. So if you are an operation, if your business is located in California,
Yes,
it's going to
it
be
is. That's why-
easier, easier to comply with the rest of the standards.
Thank you.
That's what can I tell you. Okay, great, guys. It was nice meeting you all. Have a great day, all. And I'm going to connect you with all of you. And of course, happy to provide you more information.
Thank
Have a
you very
great day.
much.
Bye-bye.
You too.